Hello everyone, and welcome to Echo Your English. Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest challenges that advanced English learners face: understanding native speakers in podcasts, interviews, and authentic audio content. If you've ever felt frustrated because you can understand textbooks and structured lessons perfectly, but when you turn on a real English podcast, you only catch about 60 or 70% of what's being said, this episode is for you. Here's something that might surprise you. Struggling to understand podcasts doesn't mean your English is bad. In fact, if you're at the point where you're challenging yourself with authentic content like podcasts, you're already an advanced learner. The problem isn't your English level. It's that podcasts present unique challenges that classroom English never prepares you for. Think about it. In a textbook or a language learning app, the speakers talk slowly and clearly. They use simple vocabulary and complete sentences. There's no background music, no multiple speakers talking over each other, no regional accents, and definitely no cultural references that assume you grew up watching American TV shows in the 1990s. But real podcasts, they're messy, fast, full of idioms and slang, and the hosts assume their audience shares their cultural knowledge. But here's the good news. Understanding podcasts is a learnable skill. It's not magic, and it's not something only native speakers can do. There are specific strategies, techniques, and approaches that can dramatically improve your podcast comprehension, and that's exactly what we're going to cover today. In this episode, we'll explore why podcasts are so challenging, even for advanced learners. We'll discuss the difference between passive listening and active listening and why that distinction matters enormously. We'll go through pre-listening strategies that set you up for success before you even press play. We'll cover during listening techniques that help you catch more information as you listen. And we'll talk about post-listening activities that solidify your understanding and accelerate your learning. We'll also discuss how to choose the right podcasts for your level, because not all podcasts are created equal when it comes to language learning. Some are excellent for learners, others will just frustrate you. We'll talk about how to use transcripts effectively without becoming dependent on them, and we'll explore how to build vocabulary from podcasts in a way that actually sticks. By the end of this episode, you'll have a complete system for approaching any English podcast with confidence. You'll know exactly what to do before, during, and after listening to maximize your comprehension and learning. You'll understand why you've been struggling, and more importantly, how to overcome those challenges. So whether you love true crime podcasts, business interviews, comedy shows, or educational content, you're about to learn how to understand them all. Let's dive in. Before we can solve a problem, we need to understand it. So let's talk about why podcasts are so much harder to understand than classroom English, or even movies and TV shows. The first reason is speed. Native English speakers in casual conversation typically speak at about 150 to 180 words per minute. But in podcasts, especially when hosts are excited or passionate about their topic, that speed can increase to 200 words per minute, or even faster. Your brain has to process information at an incredibly rapid pace, and if you miss one key word, you might lose the thread of the entire conversation. But speed isn't the only issue. There's also connected speech. Native speakers don't pronounce every word clearly and separately. Instead, words blend together, sounds disappear, and vowels get reduced. What are you going to do becomes what you gonna do. Did you eat yet becomes jeet yet. This isn't lazy speech. It's completely natural and normal. But if you learned English by reading and studying individual words, connected speech can make it sound like people are speaking an entirely different language. The third challenge is vocabulary breadth. In a controlled learning environment, you might encounter 20 to 30 new words per lesson. But in a 1-hour podcast, you might encounter 200 to 300 words or expressions that you don't know. Some of these might be technical terms related to the topic. Others might be idioms, phrasal verbs, or slang. And here's the tricky part. You can't stop and look up every unknown word, or you'll completely lose the flow of the conversation. Then there's cultural references and assumed knowledge. Podcast hosts often reference current events, pop culture, historical events, or shared cultural experiences without explanation. They assume their listeners already know what they're talking about. If a host says, "It was like a total Watergate situation," and you don't know what Watergate was, you've just lost context for understanding their point. These cultural gaps can create comprehension barriers that have nothing to do with your English grammar or vocabulary. Another major challenge is multiple speakers and overlapping conversation. Many popular podcasts feature 2 or more hosts who interrupt each other, finish each other's sentences, laugh, and talk simultaneously. Unlike scripted TV shows where people take turns speaking, podcast conversations are messy and organic. You might be focused on what one person is saying when another person jumps in with a comment and suddenly you're lost. Accent and pronunciation variation also plays a huge role. You might have trained your ear to understand one type of English, perhaps American English with a standard accent. But then you listen to a podcast with a host from Scotland, a guest from Australia, and a caller from India, and suddenly you're struggling again. Each English-speaking region has its own pronunciation patterns, vocabulary choices, and rhythm. There's also the issue of audio quality and production. Some podcasts are professionally produced with crystal clear audio. Others are recorded on phone microphones in noisy environments. Background music, sound effects, and audio editing can make it harder to catch every word. You might be listening in a less than ideal environment too, on public transportation, while exercising, or while doing other tasks, which further reduces your comprehension. And finally, there's topic complexity. Many podcasts discuss sophisticated, nuanced topics that would be challenging even in your native language. Understanding a podcast about quantum physics, economic policy, or philosophical concepts requires not just language skills, but subject matter knowledge. So, if you've been struggling with podcasts, now you know why. It's not because you're a bad English learner. It's because podcasts combine multiple challenges simultaneously. But understanding these challenges is the first step to overcoming them. Now let's talk about one of the most important distinctions in language learning, the difference between passive listening and active listening. Understanding this difference will transform your podcast comprehension. Passive listening is when you have English playing in the background while you do other things. Maybe you're listening to a podcast while cooking dinner, driving, or scrolling through social media. Your attention is divided. You're catching words here and there, but you're not fully engaged. Many language learners think that passive listening alone will improve their comprehension through osmosis. Just by exposing themselves to English, they'll magically get better. Here's the truth. Passive listening has some benefits, but it's extremely limited. Yes, it helps you get comfortable with the rhythm and sound of English. Yes, it's better than not listening to English at all. But passive listening will never dramatically improve your comprehension because your brain isn't actively working to understand. It's just letting the sounds wash over you. Active listening, on the other hand, is completely different. Active listening means giving the podcast your full attention. It means engaging your brain, thinking about what you're hearing, making predictions, asking yourself questions, and working to understand. Active listening is mentally demanding. You'll feel tired after 20 or 30 minutes of truly active listening. But this is the type of listening that actually builds your skills. Think of it this way. Imagine you want to build muscle. You could carry groceries from your car to your house every week. That's like passive listening. You're using your muscles, but not in a way that really challenges them or makes them grow. But if you go to the gym and do focused strength training, lifting weights with intention and effort, your muscles will develop much faster. That's active listening. So what does active listening actually look like in practice? It means sitting down with a notebook and pen. It means pausing when you don't understand something. It means rewinding and listening to confusing sections multiple times. It means taking notes on new vocabulary and expressions. It means asking yourself comprehension questions. What was the main point of that segment? Why did the speaker say that? What example did they give? Active listening also means eliminating distractions. Turn off your phone notifications. Close other tabs on your computer. Find a quiet space where you can concentrate. Give the podcast the same attention you would give to studying from a textbook. Now, I'm not saying you should never do passive listening. Passive listening has its place, especially for maintaining your skills and staying immersed in English. But if you want to actually improve your comprehension, you need to dedicate time to active listening. Even just 20 minutes of active listening per day will give you better results than 2 hours of passive background listening. One of the biggest mistakes language learners make is pressing play on a podcast without any preparation. They just dive in blind, and then they're surprised when they can't follow along. But professional language learners know that what you do before you start listening is just as important as the listening itself. Let's talk about pre-listening strategies that will dramatically improve your comprehension. First, choose the right podcast. Not all podcasts are equally suitable for language learners. Some podcasts are incredibly fast, full of slang, and assume deep cultural knowledge. Others are more accessible. Look for podcasts that speak clearly, avoid excessive slang, and explain concepts thoroughly. Educational podcasts, interview shows, and storytelling podcasts tend to be more learner-friendly than fast-paced comedy or highly technical shows. Also, consider starting with podcasts that have transcripts available. Many popular podcasts now offer transcripts, either for free or through platforms like Spotify. Having access to a transcript is incredibly valuable for learning, as we'll discuss later. Second, research the topic before listening. If you're about to listen to a podcast episode about climate change, space exploration, or historical events, spend 10 minutes reading about that topic first, even in your native language. Build your background knowledge, learn the key vocabulary, understand the context. This preparation will make the English much easier to follow because you'll already understand the concepts being discussed. Think about it this way. If someone gives you a lecture in English about a topic you already know well, you'll understand most of it, even if some words are unfamiliar. But if they lecture about a completely foreign topic, even simple English becomes hard to follow. Background knowledge is a huge comprehension aid. Third, read the episode description and reviews. Most podcast episodes come with a brief description or summary. Read this carefully before listening. It will tell you what to expect, introduce key names or concepts, and give you a framework for understanding. Some podcast apps also show user reviews or comments, which can give you additional context. Fourth, preview key vocabulary. If transcripts are available, skim through them quickly before listening and identify words or phrases you don't know. Look up 5 to 10 key terms that seem important to the topic. Don't try to learn every unknown word. That's overwhelming and unnecessary. Just familiarize yourself with the most essential vocabulary. When you hear these words in context, you'll recognize them and understand them better. Fifth, set a purpose for listening. Before you press play, decide what you want to get from this listening session. Are you listening to understand the main idea? To catch specific information? To analyze how native speakers use certain expressions? To enjoy a story? Having a clear purpose focuses your attention and makes your listening more effective. For example, on your first listen, your purpose might be understand the main topic and the speaker's general opinion. You're not trying to catch every word, just the big picture. On a second listen, your purpose might shift to identify 3 new vocabulary words or expressions and understand how they're used in context. Finally, set realistic expectations. You don't need to understand 100% of a podcast to benefit from it. Even catching 70% is excellent for advanced learners. Give yourself permission to not understand everything. This removes pressure and actually helps you comprehend more because you're not panicking about missed words.
Now let's talk about what to do while you're actually listening to the podcast. These during listening strategies will help you catch more information and stay engaged even when the content is challenging. First and most importantly, focus on understanding general meaning, not every single word. This is crucial. Many language learners get stuck on one unknown word and then miss the next 30 seconds of content while they're still thinking about that one word. Don't do this. If you miss a word, let it go. Keep moving forward with the speaker. Often, the context will clarify the meaning, or you'll realize that word wasn't actually essential to understanding the main point. Think of comprehension like a puzzle. You don't need every single piece to see the picture. If you get 70% or 80% of the words, you can usually infer the rest. Train yourself to tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty. This is a critical skill for real-world listening. Use the pause button strategically. There's absolutely nothing wrong with pausing a podcast to give your brain a moment to process what you just heard. Native speakers binge listen to podcasts, but you're doing something different. You're learning. After a particularly dense or information-rich section, pause for 10 or 15 seconds. Ask yourself, what did I just learn? What was the main point? This brief pause helps consolidate the information in your memory. However, don't pause after every sentence. That's too disruptive and prevents you from experiencing the natural flow of speech. Instead, pause at natural breakpoints. After a complete story, after the host finishes making a point, or at transition moments. Take smart notes. You don't need to transcribe everything you hear. That's impossible and counterproductive. Instead, jot down key words, main ideas, or interesting expressions. Your notes might look like this. Main point: climate change affecting ocean temps. New word: unprecedented. Example: rising sea levels in Pacific Islands. Brief, focused notes that capture essentials without distracting you from listening. Some learners like to use the Cornell note-taking method. Divide your page into 2 columns. In the left column, write key words or questions. In the right column, write brief notes or answers. This structure helps you organize information while listening. Listen for signpost language.
Native speakers use certain words and phrases to organize their thoughts and signal where they're going. Learning to recognize these signposts dramatically improves comprehension. Here are some examples. When introducing a topic, so today we're going to talk about, I wanted to discuss, let me tell you about. When giving examples, for instance, let me give you an example. Take, for example. When contrasting ideas, on the other hand, however, in contrast, but here's the thing. When listing points, first of all, secondly, another point is, finally. When summarizing, so basically, the bottom line is, to sum up, what I'm saying is, when you hear these signpost phrases, your brain should perk up because important information is coming. The speaker is literally telling you how their ideas are organized. Predict what's coming next. Good listeners are always making predictions. If the host says there are 3 reasons why this policy failed, your brain should immediately expect to hear 3 reasons. You're now listening for those specific points. If a speaker says, let me tell you a story about a time when I completely failed, you're predicting a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. Prediction engages your brain actively and actually helps you comprehend better because you're not just passively receiving information, you're anticipating it. Use visualization. As you listen, try to create mental images of what's being described. If the podcast is telling a story, picture the scene. If they're explaining a concept, visualize it as a diagram or image in your mind. This multi-sensory approach to listening strengthens comprehension and memory. Replay difficult sections. If you completely lose the thread of what someone is saying, don't just keep going in confusion. Rewind 15 or 30 seconds and listen again. Sometimes a second listen with the benefit of knowing where the sentence is going makes everything clear. Don't be embarrassed to replay sections multiple times. That's exactly what active learning looks like. And here's an advanced technique. Try to notice emotion and attitude, not just words. Listen to how the speaker's voice changes. Do they sound excited, skeptical, sarcastic, serious? Tone and intonation carry meaning beyond the literal words. A speaker might say, that's a great idea, with enthusiasm, meaning they love it, or with sarcasm, meaning they think it's terrible. Training your ear to catch these subtleties is part of advanced listening.
Many learners think that once the podcast ends, the learning is over. But actually, what you do after listening is just as important as the listening itself. Post-listening activities help you process, remember, and build upon what you've heard. First, summarize what you learned. Immediately after finishing a podcast episode, spend 5 minutes writing a summary. Don't look at your notes, just write from memory. What was the episode about? What were the main points? What was the most interesting thing you learned? This recall exercise strengthens your memory and reveals gaps in your comprehension. Your summary doesn't need to be long or perfect. Even 3 or 4 sentences is valuable. For example, this episode was about the benefits of meditation. The host interviewed a neuroscientist who explained how meditation changes brain structure. They discussed 3 main benefits: reduced stress, improved focus, and better emotional regulation. The most interesting part was the study showing measurable brain changes after just 8 weeks of daily meditation. Writing this summary in English is excellent practice, but if you're really struggling, you can even write it in your native language first, and then translate it to English. The goal is to process and consolidate the information. Review your notes and expand them. Look at the notes you took during listening.
While the episode is still fresh in your mind, add more detail, clarify abbreviations, and organize the information more clearly. This is also a good time to look up any words you noted but didn't have time to check during listening. Create a vocabulary list from each episode. Choose 5 to 10 words or expressions that you want to learn and write them down with their definitions and example sentences. Don't try to learn 50 words from one episode. That's overwhelming. Focus on the most useful or interesting ones. Over time, these lists will become a powerful personal vocabulary resource. Use the transcript strategically. If the podcast has a transcript, now is the time to use it, after you've listened, not before. Read through the transcript and check your comprehension. Which parts did you understand correctly? Where did you miss information? What words did you mishear? Some learners worry that using transcripts is cheating, but that's not true at all. Transcripts are an incredibly valuable learning tool when used properly. They help you identify your weak spots. Maybe you realize you consistently misunderstand certain sounds or miss certain grammatical structures. This awareness is the first step to improvement. Here's a powerful technique. Listen while reading the transcript. Play the podcast again, but this time follow along with the text. This trains your ear to match sounds with spelling and helps you internalize pronunciation patterns. You'll notice how written words transform in connected speech. Reflect on your listening process. Ask yourself, what was hardest about this episode? Was it speed, vocabulary, accent, topic complexity? What strategy helped most? What would you do differently next time? This metacognitive reflection, thinking about your own thinking, is how advanced learners accelerate their progress. Finally, share and discuss what you learned. If possible, talk to someone about the podcast episode, in English if you can, or even in your native language. Explaining ideas to others is one of the best ways to solidify your understanding. If you don't have a conversation partner, you can write a review of the episode online or record yourself summarizing it in English. Some learners like to keep a podcast journal where they write brief reflections on each episode they listen to. Over time, this journal becomes a record of your learning journey and a source of pride as you see how much you've improved.
Not all podcasts are created equal for language learning purposes. Choosing the right podcasts for your level and interests can make the difference between frustration and steady progress. Start with learner-friendly podcasts. If you're transitioning from structured English lessons to authentic content, begin with podcasts specifically designed for English learners. These podcasts use clear pronunciation, slower speeds, and simpler vocabulary, while still covering interesting topics. Examples include 6-Minute English from BBC, All Ears English, or Plain English with Derek Thompson. These bridge the gap between classroom English and native speed content. Once you're comfortable with learner podcasts, gradually move to native speaker content. Start with podcasts known for clear speech and good production quality. Interview podcasts like How I Built This or TED Talks Daily tend to be clearer than conversation-heavy podcasts. Story-based podcasts like This American Life or The Moth are excellent because narrative structure provides context that aids comprehension. Match podcasts to your interests. You'll stay motivated and comprehend better when you actually care about the content. If you love cooking, listen to food podcasts. If you're interested in technology, find tech podcasts. Your background knowledge and genuine interest will boost your comprehension significantly.
Listening to a podcast about a topic you find boring just because it's good for learning is a recipe for giving up. Vary your podcast diet. Listen to different types of podcasts to expose yourself to various accents, speaking styles, and vocabulary sets. One week, listen to an interview podcast. The next week, try a true crime narrative. Then maybe a science podcast, followed by a comedy show. This variety prevents boredom and ensures you're developing well-rounded listening skills. Pay attention to episode length. When you're starting out with authentic podcasts, 60-minute episodes can be overwhelming. Look for podcasts with shorter episodes. 15 to 25 minutes is ideal for focused, active listening. You can always listen to longer podcasts, but break them into segments rather than trying to power through in one session. Now let's talk about building a sustainable listening routine. Consistency matters more than volume. It's better to do 20 minutes of active listening every day than to do 3 hours once a week. Daily exposure keeps your ear tuned to English and builds momentum. Create a podcast listening schedule. Designate specific times for podcast listening. Maybe it's during your morning coffee, on your commute, during lunch breaks, or before bed. When listening becomes a habit tied to a specific time or activity, you're more likely to stick with it. However, remember the distinction between active and passive listening. Your daily routine might include both, perhaps 20 minutes of active, focused listening in the morning, and then passive listening during your evening walk or doing chores. Both have value, but make sure you're including regular active listening sessions. Track your progress. Keep a list of podcasts you've listened to, or use apps that automatically track your listening. Seeing your progress, I've listened to 50 podcast episodes in English, is incredibly motivating. You might also notice patterns. Certain types of podcasts are easier for you, or you comprehend better at certain times of day. Some learners like to re-listen to episodes. This might sound boring, but it's actually very effective. The first time you listen, you're catching maybe 70%. The second time, you might catch 85%. The third time, you might catch details and nuances you completely missed before. Plus, re-listening is much less cognitively demanding than listening to new content, so it can be a good option when you're tired but still want English exposure. Finally, be patient with yourself. Podcast comprehension is a skill that develops gradually. You might feel like you're not making progress, but you are. It's just happening slowly. If you listen consistently for 3 months, then go back and re-listen to a podcast from month 1, you'll be amazed at how much easier it sounds. That's proof of your progress.
So, let's bring everything together. We've covered a lot in this episode, and I want to make sure you leave with a clear action plan. First, remember that struggling to understand podcasts is completely normal for English learners. Podcasts are challenging because they combine rapid speech, connected speech, diverse vocabulary, cultural references, multiple speakers, and complex topics. Don't feel discouraged. You're tackling one of the hardest aspects of English learning. Second, recognize the difference between passive listening and active listening. While passive listening has some benefits, active listening, where you're fully engaged and working to understand, is what actually improves your skills. Even 15 to 20 minutes of daily active listening will transform your comprehension over time. Third, use the 3-phase approach: pre-listening, during listening, and post-listening. Before you press play, choose appropriate podcasts, research the topic, preview vocabulary, and set a clear purpose for listening. During listening,
Focus on general meaning rather than every word. Use the pause button strategically. Take smart notes. Listen for signpost language and predict what's coming next. After listening, summarize what you learned, review your notes, use transcripts to check comprehension, and reflect on your process. Fourth, choose podcasts wisely. Start with learner-friendly content and gradually progress to native speaker podcasts. Match content to your interests, vary your podcast diet, and pay attention to episode length. Build a consistent listening routine that includes both active and passive listening. And finally, be patient and trust the process. Podcast comprehension doesn't improve overnight. It develops gradually through consistent exposure and practice. Celebrate small victories, understanding a joke, catching a cultural reference, following a complex explanation. These moments of success are signs that your skills are growing. Here's your challenge for this week. Choose one English podcast episode. It can be from a learner podcast or a native speaker podcast, depending on your level. Before you listen, spend 10 minutes researching the topic and reading the episode description. Then, do one session of active listening, full attention, taking notes, pausing when needed. Afterward, write a brief summary and identify 5 new words or expressions you learned. That's it. Just one episode with full engagement. If you do this consistently, one quality listening session per week, you'll see dramatic improvement in 3 months. Add in some passive listening during other activities, and you'll progress even faster. Remember, every podcast you listen to is making you better. Even when it feels hard, even when you don't understand everything, you're training your ear, building your vocabulary, and developing your intuition for how English really sounds. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Echo Your English. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to our channel for more English learning content. We create these episodes to help you improve your English speaking fluency through listening and practice. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep echoing your English. Good luck with your podcast listening journey.